When Prince Harry agreed to sit across from Savannah Guthrie for what was meant to be a high-profile but routine interview, he likely expected the usual polished exchange, a mix of light challenges and polite questions that would allow him to promote his latest book, sprinkle in a few emotional anecdotes, and reinforce his carefully curated image as the misunderstood royal searching for healing and independence. But what unfolded live on air was anything but ordinary, because from the moment Savannah welcomed him, her tone firm but respectful signaled that this wouldn't be another easy segment. And as soon as she asked her first question, not about the book itself, but about the contradiction between his calls for privacy and his participation in a streaming series, podcast appearances, and a best-selling memoir that revealed deeply personal stories about his family, the air in the room grew noticeably tighter, and Prince Harry, usually composed and meek, paused before launching into a well-rehearsed explanation about controlling his own narrative and correcting tabloid falsehoods. But Savannah wasn't letting the script carry the interview, and without raising her voice or losing composure, she leaned forward and gently but directly asked, "But don't you think sharing every detail of private conversations with your father and brother crosses the very lines you say others violated?" And Harry, visibly caught off guard, offered a vague response about intention and healing, but Savannah pressed again, bringing up specific quotes, moments from his own Netflix series, and words that had made global headlines. And for every attempt Harry made to soften the narrative, Savannah calmly but relentlessly brought the focus back to accountability, asking whether it was fair to expose others who hadn't chosen the spotlight in the same way, and the tension, quiet but unmistakable, built with each exchange. And by the time Savannah asked, "Isn't there a difference between sharing your truth and monetizing your grievances?" the moment turned electric, because Harry, clearly rattled, shifted in his seat, gave a tight smile, and began a response that felt more defensive than thoughtful. And Savannah, never flinching, gave him space to answer but didn't let the moment fade, responding with a cool, "I think many people admire your courage, but they also wonder where the line is between transparency and betrayal." And with that, the balance of power shifted entirely, because what began as a celebrity interview had become a masterclass in journalism, where polite tone met piercing truth, and viewers across the world watched as Harry, once comfortable in curated settings, now faced the kind of questioning that demanded real reflection, not rehearsed sympathy. And when the interview wrapped, social media exploded with reactions, some praising Savannah's professionalism, others accusing her of ambushing a guest, but no one could deny that something rare had happened, an actual moment of accountability on live television, where the glossy layer of fame was peeled back just enough to reveal discomfort, contradiction, and the reality that no title, no background, and no amount of royal history makes someone immune to being asked the hard questions by someone brave enough to ask them. And in the hours and days after Savannah Guthrie's on-air showdown with Prince Harry, the television moment that had first felt quietly confrontational began to roar across the globe like a digital wildfire, with clips of the most uncomfortable exchanges looped endlessly on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. And while Harry had answered every question with his usual poise and polished calm, the way his tone shifted, the way his jaw tensed, and the flicker of disbelief in his eyes when Savannah refused to move past the contradictions in his public-private narrative had captivated audiences and ignited a whirlwind of opinion from every corner of the internet and every level of the press. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone unexpectedly sharp. It was a shift in how modern royalty and fame are interrogated, and people who had once followed Harry's post-royal journey with open sympathy now began to pause, reflect, and ask questions Savannah had dared to ask first. Like, where does healing end and branding begin? How do you claim privacy while publishing diaries? And can you call out exploitation while profiting from it yourself? And as fans defended Harry's right to share his pain, others applauded Savannah for doing what so many had not: refusing to be dazzled, refusing to dance around the double standards, and refusing to give any public figure, royal or not, a free pass just because they came bearing trauma and charm. And behind the scenes, media outlets scrambled to react, booking roundtables, calling experts, and debating whether this was the beginning of a new chapter in journalism where tough questions would return to mainstream interviews after years of polite promotion. And even though Harry's team issued no immediate statement, the silence itself was telling, as whispers grew about how surprised they had been by Savannah's tone, how tightly they had tried to control the press tour, and how clearly unprepared they were for a journalist who did her job without fear of backlash. And as days passed, headlines shifted from "Harry opens up" to "Savannah asks what no one else would," and Guthrie herself, never one to gloat, remained characteristically calm and professional, letting the moment speak for itself, never attacking, never defending, simply allowing her record and her questions to carry the legacy of that now historic interview. While viewers, especially young women and aspiring journalists, began to see her not just as a morning show anchor but as a force of accountability in a world often clouded by spin. And though some royal loyalists called the exchange unfair, accusing Savannah of coldness or bias, it only underscored the power of what she had done. Because in an era where too many public conversations feel scripted and strategic, she had reminded the world what it means to speak truth to power, even power wrapped in trauma, family history, and media myth. And that's why this wasn't just a clash between interviewer and guest, but a cultural recalibration, a reminder that transparency cannot be one-sided, that fame cannot be a shield from hard questions, and that empathy and accountability are not mutually exclusive. And now, as future interviews are planned and public figures prepare their next big reveals, one name echoes louder than ever in green rooms and briefing sessions. Savannah Guthrie, the woman who didn't shout, didn't insult, didn't sensationalize, but simply looked a prince in the eye, asked what needed to be asked, and in doing so, changed the conversation forever.